Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles. I am delighted to be joined today with Tyler Savage with his fantastic feature film. I have so many questions, blinders, but for those that haven't seen it, let's take a look at a clip.
He works for a rideshare company. He dropped me off at home, and since he started following me, okay, he started showing up and sending messages, like I had to tell him to leave me alone.
You probably antagonized him.
Apparently.
You kids have fun.
Sit down! Tyler, I'm so glad we get to reunite again.
Great to see you, Danny. Thanks for having me, man.
I love your rustic image. It looks like you're in some beautiful experience over there. I love it.
Yeah, it's my dining room. It makes me look fancier than I am, but it does.
So very fancy. Tyler, you know how much I loved your film. It was just brilliant. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. I just want to say, for those people that haven't seen your film yet, if you could just share like a brief synopsis of your film.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's sort of like a stalker thriller. It's about a guy who moves to LA from Austin, Texas, after sort of a bad breakup, and he's trying to put his life together and figure out what comes next. And in the first couple of days of being in town, he goes on a date and gets a ride home with sort of a rideshare driver, and him and this rideshare driver kick up a friendship, and then things start getting a little weird from there. And the rideshare driver gets increasingly obsessed with our hero. And so it sort of plays on, how technology makes us vulnerable. And we're always, sort of living with sort of new dangers in our lives because of all the convenience of technology.
It's such a journey that you take us on, and you never quite know where you're going to take us, which I always love, that kind of roller coaster ride that you provide for us. But what's fascinating, living in Los Angeles and knowing how many of us lost souls just end up here, and you're trying to meet new people, and you're going to meet some crazy ones on the way, whether you like it or not. Hopefully, in this case, not as crazy as your film ends up, but like it is kind of a scary, weird place to sort of like start afresh. And I love that whole story because it really does, it can be quite relatable.
I hear you.
But I'm curious for you, where did the inspiration come from in creating this particular story?
Yeah, I mean, I think the inspiration came from, a strange rideshare drive that I actually was on. And, it just sort of, that thought enters your head, like, wow, this is sort of this individual probably knows more about me and knows my actual address now and my phone number. And, that's sort of uncomfortable. So that was sort of the initial inspiration. And I started talking to my writing partner, Dash Hawkins, about that. And I think from there too, we also knew that, the stalker genre or subgenre was something that we could have fun with. And I, try to take some inspiration from like, 90s thrillers, but also from, from sort of, 70s, some of 70s thrillers too, in the, Brian De Palma. And so I think that it was sort of a little bit of an amalgamation of all these influences, but kind of started with that kernel of an actual creepy rideshare driver.
Well, I mean, we've all kind of had them, and it's I love that you mentioned about the technology, because sometimes I think we fail to realize just how quickly technology is moving along. Like 8 years ago, we didn't even know what rideshare was. Now it's part of our everyday worlds, and we just give out this information, and we don't really know where it ends up or whose hands it's going to be in. And I think it's a prime example to be cautious of your ride shares and all the interactions that we make through technology. Exactly. I think it's got an important factor upon there as well, but also kind of that vulnerability of being in a new place and not really knowing how things work. And I think you captured that really well with your main character, in particularly because there's just that. Do you find is that kind of person that stands out that's like new to this LA and trying to work it out? Like it really stood out in your character. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny too, because Vincent, who plays Andy, is a close friend of mine, and Michael, who plays Roger, is also a close friend, and we've all known each other for a few years. So it's funny because they're both from Texas. I lived in Texas for 4 or 5 years. And so all of us had sort of done that trip, and we'd already made that. I'm from LA originally, so I didn't have the transplant experience, but they really had a lot that they could relate to with that. And then I think also for the plot itself and the way sort of, you know, the villain works in this movie, the fact that Andy was sort of an unsuspecting out-of-towner obviously is sort of part of the reason that he falls into this trap to begin with.
Yeah, let's speak about your super cast, because I know you've obviously got a personal relationship with a couple of them, but my goodness, did they lead the line very, very well in this feature. And you know, and the great thing about them, all three of your lead actors in particularly, but just you kind of never knew where that character was going to kind of lead you, or where they were taking you, or what they were going to do next. Was that kind of something that you kind of wanted to sort of have, not just with the suspecting character, but with everybody? I felt like it was a really interesting experience watching it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I love that question. I think that, you know, again, working with something that is sort of a familiar subgenre like the stalker film, it's sort of from the beginning, from the get-go, I was like, where is there room to do something fresh with this? So I think that, you know, it's always fun to be able to sort of lean on tropes or lean on cliches and then take the audience in a different place. So we did try to consciously do that with every character so that, you know, Roger's not just a psychopath, you know what I mean? Or Andy's not just a vulnerable guy who's never, you know, hurt anybody in his life, and he's just a good old, you know, small town figure. You know, we didn't want to lean into that as the ultimate truths of these characters, but we did want people to see them and be like, oh, I get it. And then you sort of walk them into the surprise because they think they already know these people in a way.
And obviously you've got a personal relationship with the two male characters, but Christine, who did a fantastic job. Tell us a little bit about how she got involved in the project.
Yeah, I mean, Christine was so great to work with, and I'm so thrilled with her performance in the film. We were working with a casting director named Kelly Knox, who was great to work with, and he brought her up as an idea pretty early on in the process, and then she and I had lunch and hit it off. And it all just kind of came together from there. But it was interesting because I'd say that Christine, Michael, and Vince all sort of had slightly different backgrounds in terms of, you know, their acting styles and performance. So it was a good challenge for me to try to get everybody to play together. And I think that they ultimately ended up bringing out each other's strengths, you know. So that's fun.
Most definitely. One of the things that I love you mentioned earlier is this was a kind of combination of different periods, different style films, different decades, and like, I love that. Like, I love the kind of journey it took us on, and I could feel where some of the influences came, and you know, those kind of 90s thrillers that are so distinctive as well, which I love and adore. How, like, it's easier said than done when you're thinking those ideas and you've got films in mind that you want to reference, but how do you go about kind of incorporating that into your film in present day? Like, is it very much for you working with a cinematographer and kind of captivating your production design? How's that process for you when you're trying to kind of emulate some of those themes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that to me, it was like we wanted it to be a modern story because it's about technology, but but I really wanted it to feel timeless. You know, I wanted it to feel like, wow, this is like a throwback 90s thing, but it also feels like a 70s stalker movie in a way. And we even reference, you know, Play Misty for Me, or even some early De Palma films in there too. And I think that it was, like you said, a lot about the cinematography. I think Antonio Cisneros, our cinematographer, and I talked a lot about that. You know, we really wanted the daytime world to completely contrast the nighttime world. And the references we were playing with were obvious. You know, it was like, well, don't steer away from it all the time. And also, I think, you know, it was to some extent, the writing, like you didn't want to talk about, hey, this is an iPhone 10, or hey, this is an Android, or hey, which, you know, MacBook Air do you have? You wanted to keep the level of detail about technology pretty minimal. You know, so we tried to do that. But then I think it really was in more of the stylistic kind of execution choices that it kind of took on, like it's a throwback, but it's also modern. And I also want to give a shout out to our composer, Devin Johnson, who did a tremendous job. And, you know, we were all over the place in terms of what this movie was going to sound like at first. And then he really helped us lock in, because I kept talking about noir films, and I love early noir, and we really keyed in on the saxophone as the sound of noir. And then he found this incredible, saxophone player who's a composer in his own right. And from there, it really started to click, where it was like, oh, this is fresh and it's modern, but it's also old school in a fun way. So
yeah, and then you mixed it in with this, genre of a thriller perspective too, which it's so nice and unique to hear the saxophone in this particular kind of style of film as well, which I absolutely love. So yeah, great credit to him as well. It's so interesting about day and night and having a different feel, because I feel like Los Angeles in particular has a very different feel at nighttime as it does during the day, because we're all so spread out, and it's it can be quite it's a very different feel to that actually. Doing those kind of shoots, and again, let's not underestimate, you're making a feature film and there's a lot of trials and tribulations that you have. How were some of the experiences in the locations that you had? Was there any kind of difficult challenges that you faced? You certainly were moving around the city quite a lot. So how was that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we did it. We shot this movie sort of in the summer of 2019, so not much, a year to a year and a half ago. And I'm just glad we didn't try to do it this year. It would have been impossible.
Yeah.
But we actually, everybody going into this movie, it's a micro budget film. We did it. I'm very proud of what we were able to achieve on the budget we had. And everybody sort of warned me against shooting in Los Angeles without a budget, because everybody's wise to filmmaking in Los Angeles. They say, it's like, oh, hey, let me have your coffee shop for $100, and they're like, screw you, we get $5,000 for Grey's Anatomy or whatever. So that was hard, but we had some really pleasant surprises. Also, the city was actually great to work with. We were able to shoot in places like Echo Park and Griffith Park, really for not much cost at all. I think we had to have a fire marshal on set one day, which was like $300. But I guess, no real nightmares. The hardest day by far was when we were shooting the climax in that warehouse, which is sort of in Boyle Heights downtown.
Brilliant.
And and it was harrowing, obviously for the actors, but also for the crew to some degree, because it ended up being a 15-hour day or something, which was just, everybody has on an independent film. You usually have one or two of those days, but when it's 4 or 5 in the morning and you're fighting sunlight, I think that was probably the hardest location for us. But everything else I felt very fortunate with.
Well, it was a climax scene, so it's very important that it came out well, and it was really a wonderful scene to watch, and you really see everything kind of unfold. I do love that you mentioned though, and you mentioned this in the film festival, and I love that you mentioned about working with the city and finding those locations, because I think there is a misconception that it just seems like an impossible task, and unless you've got a Marvel film, it's impossible. And I love that you found ways in which it worked for you, and you did your research and you did that. And was it a surprise to you though? However, was it a surprise that, oh, this is actually not as difficult as what it could be?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in a way it was sort of a pleasant surprise. And we also didn't even have a real location manager. It was our producer, Dash Hawkins, working with our other, producer, Dan Pisano, and our associate producer, Max Neese. And they were really just staying in touch with FilmLA. Certain things wouldn't come through until the day of the shoot. And we were just hoping that permit was going to come through in time. One time we just had to go ahead and shoot, even though it didn't. You have to take some of those risks.
Yeah.
But for the most part, really, I think that it is important for people to know that, hey, if you've got $180, $200 for the permit, and maybe you need a couple $100 to have a park representative there with you, you can actually get this tremendous production value in your film at a cost. But the one thing I will say that was funny is the day we shot at Griffith Park, it was about 106 degrees. And so we were all just sweating profusely, trying to make the actors look good. So that is something where if we had the Marvel money, I'm sure it would have been really nice.
Yeah, no, of course, right. But I think it's nice. I think it takes a weight off you as a director to know that today's cover, we haven't got to worry about permits and things, like we're supposed to be here. And I just think that's a great weight, obviously, as an independent film director, and actually leaving budget for that too. I think that's also equally a really good thing.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, I believe in the whole, ask for forgiveness, not permission thing. But
Yeah,
obviously, if you can have the permission and it's only
yeah,
going to cost you $100 and then you don't have
yeah,
to live with anxiety on the day,
yeah,
then I'll always take that route if I
yeah.
can. Yeah.
Tyler, obviously, when you've got obviously a relationship with some of the characters in there, obviously you get to know each other and you've got a good essence of trust. How are you as a director? Are you quite hands-on? Is rehearsal a big thing? Improvisation? Like, how does that process? Because there's some high stakes in this film. There's some also fantastically dark comedy moments in there as well, which I love too. How was that process for you in getting that from your actors?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was sort of, figuring out the tone of it. I think that Michael comes from a strong comedy and improv background, and Vince does too, to a degree. And Christine comes from more, TV work and larger production things too. So it was interesting. Like I said, we sort of had a whole range, a whole spectrum of experiences with them. And we definitely did quite a bit of improv up front. I really believe in sort of using improv starters, or that's what I call them, to just kind of get actors working together and familiar together. I mean, we even did some funny stuff, like with Michael and Vince, I had them do, some rideshare improvs, and where Vince was playing the driver and Michael was playing the passenger.
Oh, cool.
And, and just things to kind of get them loose and playing with each other. And then in terms of the comedy stuff and bringing out the best in everybody, I think dread is funny. I think that when things are dreadful, they're they can be hilarious. So I think that was sort of like, Michael has this ability to just really kind of put other performers on the spot, where he will just hold their eye contact in a way that is so unwavering that it creates this tension. And also Vince, like he has that quality in him naturally, where he's just a good-hearted guy that's very relatable. So a lot, and with Christine too, she's a very naturally kind and approachable person, but she also has a lot going on. She's a very intelligent person, and she has a lot of, she's wondering 3 steps ahead. Yes, but what do you want me to do here? How am I going to fight back when he comes at me this way? So it was cool. It was sort of a dance, and I'd say that things were fairly loose, mostly with the exception of the climax, where due to the blocking, there was a certain amount of, we had to be a little bit more rigid with some of that stuff.
I'm glad you mentioned about Michael, because there were like it was making me uncomfortable, some of the things that he was doing. Like I was like, oh no, this like that cringy, like, oh, this is, I was getting goosebumps, like, because it's just the stuff that he does, but also because you really felt for Vincent's character and just what he was going through, and oh god, it was a lot. I mean, it worked anyway. It definitely worked. And I think it's always fascinating to see these characters go on a journey. I don't think, I mean, no spoilers alert, but I don't think anyone articulated where you were going to take us, and it was so good where you did take us. And we'll get to that in a second. But I just want to say, aside from obviously 106 degrees heat and dealing with some of the locations, I want to ask a 2-part question. Firstly, how many shoot days did you actually do to create this film? And secondly, what was kind of the biggest challenge that you had to face, that you had to sort of manage and overcome in this project?
That's great. Yeah, I think that the first question, we had about 20 shooting days for principal. We were able to do 5-day weeks, which I really thought was a good idea. And that was something that all the producers, and Chad Harbold, one of the producers too, we all just felt like, why make it miserable and do these 6 or 7-day weeks if we can kind of just take this month? Because and also we had to switch into overnight. So when you're doing a transition into shooting overnight from a normal day schedule, you're going 7 to 7, and then suddenly you flipped it and you're going 8 p.m. until 6 or 7 in the morning. It just, you need that buffer in there. So that was tricky. And then we actually did, about a month after the shoot, maybe 6 weeks, we did 2 days of pickups, which were just at my house. So like everything that we did with them in the tent, like when they go on the tent trip, or they have this little pillow talk moment at Andy's apartment, those were actually just shot in my bed in close-up in a black box.
What? I love it.
Yeah, it was great. It was just so fun. Like, we literally had maybe 3 or 4 crew members, and it was all just done very efficiently. So I always vote for that for other filmmakers. If you could ever build in even 1 or 2 days of
Yeah.
pickup shoots, it just helps you dial things in a little bit more. Like there's
Yeah.
especially when you don't, if you had a 40-day shoot or a 60-day shoot, I don't think you'd need it. But if you're really constrained and your money's constrained, I think it helps. And in terms of the biggest challenge of making the film, I think it was sort of finding the balance of humor and dread. Kind of that was something that was always part of the process from the beginning, where you want to create, like you said about Michael, there can be moments that are very kind of funny in this awkward way, and you're trying to figure out how to relate to them, and they're making you laugh kind of nervously, but you don't want it to be, too cheesy to the point that now the end doesn't actually land, or it doesn't feel really impactful emotionally. So I think that was probably the biggest thing. And that was part of the reason we did the reshoots, was to have a little bit more material with the romance, a little bit more of the soft stuff that wasn't just plot driven and vengeance driven the whole time. So I think that's something that I'm still learning, and will always be a bit of a learning curve. Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, firstly, thanks for sharing about some of your pickups. That's some really good advice there. And you have me completely mystified. I never would have guessed that you did that in your own bedroom and created this atmosphere. Like, it's amazing. And well done for, again, great scenes that save a lot of time when you can utilize what you have. And no, I mean, it's amazing. I think, do you kind of enjoy as a director? Like, I mean, I had no idea where you were going to take me. I was like, am I about to go? Like, do you like that audience manipulation with your work? Like, is that, because it worked on me.
I do. I mean, I think that partially, it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's like you give people a thrill with a movie. I mean, that's what I want, is like, I think that the thing that I think I'll keep working on in my career is taking the things that are familiar to us and finding ways of reinventing them a little bit. Because I think that so many times in the film marketplace too, is people won't watch it if they don't feel like they've already seen it to some degree. Which is a weird thing psychologically. Like if something seems so far out there or experimental, a lot of people won't gravitate towards it, versus, Blinders has actually been picked up, which I'm very happy about. And we're rebranding the movie to Stalker. And so the distributor wants to release it under the title Stalker, just because, again, people can flip through and understand, like, oh, it's a thriller and it's called Stalker. I get it, and it's sort of, I think in terms of manipulating an audience, I think it is fun to take the things that are tried and true and then find a way of flipping them on their head a little bit.
I mean, that's great. And I think that's a really important process, that when you're, extending your film baby family and you're working with distributors and, they're suggesting things to you and just going with it and going with the journey. I mean, that's great. I mean, all I can say is that I was kind of so shell shocked by our turning of events in the film, and then into the finale, which led to me to feel like this open-ended. Do we get more? Is there more coming? Because I want it. I love where you took me. Is there more to this journey of Blinders Stalker?
I mean, I would love to think that there is, and I think the jury's out on that, and we'll see how, what success the distributor and us have with the release, and if there is more momentum around this, I would love to do that. But I think that, most people that have been chipping away as filmmakers or creatives or content makers or whatever it is, it's like, you keep multiple irons in the fire, and then you see, hopefully. But I think with this film too, I love films that have sort of the, cyclical nature, where it's sort of like you're almost coming back to the beginning of the movie in a way. And I think that movies that end, sort of in a big expansive way, where you actually are, it's not so much closing a book, but it's opening a new one, and you feel that energy moving forward. That's always a good feeling to me. So I tried to nail that down.
Well, it's always exciting when you create a world and then we still want more from the characters and stuff that you created. I would welcome
the opportunity, absolutely. And I already, Dash and I have already talked about some of what that might, entail.
Yeah, you can put this little clip in and send it to your distributor just to remind them that I need more. Okay,
Exactly.
But no, I just want to say so obviously that's going on. Congratulations on that. That's a big part of making sure it gets to be seen all over the world. But what is next? What are you next working on? What is next for the moment, Tyler?
Yeah, so the film was picked up by Vertical Entertainment. They said that they're probably looking hopefully second quarter of next year. So I guess that'll mean the spring sometime. So for right now, I'm really trying to get 2 or 3 scripts together that I can hopefully kind of have ready as the next feature, and then use that exposure or momentum to try to, get some funding or get an attachment on the next thing. So I'm really excited for it, and hopefully this will be, I can go from micro to low budget or something.
Yes.
Take every little baby step. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Tyler, if you can make this amazing feature, with what you did do it on, and I mean, it's great credit to you as a filmmaker and all of your cast and crew for putting this together. I'm so glad you did it last year, not shoot it this year. That was good. That was well worth. Good thinking ahead there.
It was all part of my plan. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, listen, Tyler. Thank you so much for your film. Please keep bringing more films to us, because it was a real joy, and I love your vision. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Danny. Thank you guys again for having me. Pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it.